All right, so what about our variables? What kind of variables can we use? Can we use anything? No, you can't use anything and make these regression models work, at least the way you're going to learn them. So the dependent variable, the variable that's trying to be explained, needs to be interval or ratio in nature. Now it can be something else, but those are statistics courses for PhD students, not for undergraduates. So an interval or a ratio variable is all that's allowed for your dependent variables in simple and multiple regression here. That means a ratio, if you don't know what an interval and ratio variable is, you ought to go back into your book. I'm sure it's explained, and it would have been something that would have been a topic of E280. So why don't you look at that? The independent variable, however, has a little more freedom, even in this course. It can be any kind of variable, either a nominal variable, an ordinal variable, an interval variable, or a ratio variable. Now, most of the time, we're going to use ratio type variables, numerical variables that have some legitimate meaning to them. But when we talk about dummy variables, that'll be an ordinal variable. Actually, it's a nominal variable. And we'll use some other ones too later on in the course. But for right now, the interval variable can really be just about anything. We're going to use square feet, which happens to be numerical, and the 0 has some meaning, so it's definitely a ratio variable. The most important step in the process for defining a regression model is problem definition. It's absolutely critical here because this is the foundation for everything else we're going to do. So you need to know, what are we trying to do? What is the objective here? Do we want to buy a new home? And so we're trying to help ourselves determine what price we should offer people, or whether some asking price is way out of a line or something. Okay, I've used this right now. I'm trying to trade my daughter's truck in and buy her a car, and I can get online, and in a matter of an hour, I can download the data for, say, 30 different Nissan Altimas that she's interested in, and put in the mileage and the year and other information about the car, run my analysis, and I can tell that, hey, every year this car gets older, it's worth about maybe, I don't know, say $800 less. And for every mile that's on it, I need to deduct 11 cents off the price of the car. So, those are things that are relatively easy to learn and to use. So that could be my objective. I'm trying to make sure I don't overpay for my daughter's car. And then who's going to use it? Is it just me, myself personally, or is it some multinational organization who's getting ready to make a $20 million or $100 million investment in building a production facility in another country? Those are two different types of problems, and the accuracy and the data that you need varies greatly there. And then what are the expected benefits? I'm just trying to make sure I don't overpay. That multinational wants to make sure they're making a good investment in that country that's going to pay off for many, many years. And then how will the results be used? Who's going to use them? I just myself personally? Is this going up to your supervisor and then some general manager and a vice president and then to the board for some big vote? And then how much resources are available? Well, I can easily spend an hour of my time on the weekend collecting this car data and running that analysis. But if you've only got 3 days to do this analysis for this $100 million international project, that just isn't much time, and unless the data is easily available, you're going to have a hard time coming up with a really thorough analysis. When we specify our regression models, we want to make sure we use relevant theory. And in general, in business, we're going to use economic theory is going to be our the basis for our models. And that's why we wanted you to have E201 and 202 done, because then it's kind of ingrained into you, that the higher the price, usually the lower the demand for some object or good. Not always, but sometimes. I think whether or not you pay attention to the gold market, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, gold was selling at maybe $600 an ounce. And, about double what the historical norm had been, double and triple that. Well, just as much, I think, as 6 months ago, gold was selling for $1,900 an ounce. I think now it's bounced back down to around 1,400, maybe even down to 1,300. But, you know, and it seemed like people went nuts when it went over $1,000 an ounce. People just went nuts, and the demand just became ludicrous, and that just ran the price up even faster. So that doesn't always happen. Most of the time, a higher price means less demand. Think about when gasoline goes to from 3.80 to 4.25 or 4.50. Are you going to use more or less gasoline than when it was 3.50 a gallon? Okay, typically most of us would use, or at least attempt to use a little less in the short run, and then maybe over the long run, maybe we buy a more efficient car, or we don't use a car, or we carpool, or we find an alternative job where we can work from home. So that's kind of it about the model. You need to define, when you say something like income, what kind, what's explicitly, what type of income do you mean? Do you mean household income? Do you mean personal income? Discretionary? Disposable? So think about your variables, and I'll probably be, when you're getting ready to run your multiple regression model, or at least think about your data, I'm going to question you about that to make sure you've got a good idea of what you want, because it could have totally different meanings or relevancy to your model depending on how you're going to define the model. I should be putting this slide up for you to look at the relationship, the mathematical relationship between the variables. In this slide, I've got it here as number 20. The first equation is showing you the typical simple regression equation, that y, some dependent variable, is a function of some constant, that's what the beta 0 is, plus beta 1, which is a regression coefficient for the independent variable. X1 is your independent variable, plus some amount of error, because remember, some of our model we can explain and some of our model we cannot, and those were those components. The constant and the regression coefficient times the independent variable, those are relatively the explained part of the model. The error is the unexplained amount of the model. The second equation on that slide is the curvilinear relationship, the quadratic equation, that we're going to look at in the multiple regression. It'll be one of the twists in the multiple regression part of the class.